She can't cancel what she can't comprehend. That was the tweet. Jasmine Crockett, with 10 words, shattered the silence and the internet. Within seconds, it was everywhere. Screens lit up across the country. One user called it the most surgical takedown of the year. Another simply wrote, "Sis did not come to play." Cable news anchors tripped over each other trying to explain it. TikTok lit up with stitches, reaction videos, slow-motion readings of the tweet like it was scripture. On Twitter, hashtags surged. Yash Crockett claps back. Karoline who? Tweet heard round the world. But it wasn't just the tweet. It was what it exposed. Karoline Leavitt accuses Reppers Jasmine Crockett of race baiting, barked the Fox News chyron. Freshman Republican tries to cancel rising black congresswoman backfires, read MSNBC's headline, drenched in schadenfreude, the halls of Congress, whispers turned to roars. Staffers texted each other under the table. Commentators split into camps. Was this a political hit job gone wrong? Or the moment Gen Z politics outpaced old-school outrage? And in the middle of the digital storm stood Jasmine Crockett. Calm, composed, unbothered. The tweet sat pinned to her profile like a trophy. Just 10 words, no hashtags, no follow-up. She said her piece. And somehow, that silence was louder than Leavitt's entire crusade. What happened next was nothing short of cultural combustion. People felt it. Young black women felt it. Immigrants felt it. Anyone who'd ever been talked down to, written off, or called angry for simply speaking truth felt it. It wasn't just a clapback. It was a call to arms. But Crockett didn't just stumble into that moment. And Karoline Leavitt didn't just wake up one day and pick a fight. This was a clash years in the making between two Americas, two generations, two visions of leadership. So how did we get here? How did one tweet ignite a political reckoning? Let's rewind the tape, because this didn't start with a tweet. It started with a smirk, a microphone, and a moment Karoline Leavitt thought she could control. She couldn't, and what unfolded next shook the entire house. But before the storm hit, the trap had to be set. It began predictably with a camera and a calculated pause. Karoline Leavitt, freshly polished and media-trained, sat in a House committee hearing not to listen, but to perform. She wasn't there for policy. She was there for a clip, a moment, a made-for-Twitter outrage package, and Jasmine Crockett was the perfect target. "I'm just wondering," Leavitt said, tilting her head with mock innocence, "if Congresswoman Crockett's repeated emphasis on race is truly helping Americans, or just dividing them further?" Few staffers looked up. Crockett didn't flinch, but the air shifted. There it was, the dog whistle disguised as dialogue, wrapped in just asking questions, delivered with practiced disingenuousness. A strike meant not to land logically, but emotionally, to frame Crockett not as a representative, but a stereotype. The clip hit Fox News by nightfall. Tucker's replacement grinned through a segment titled, "When Woke Goes Too Far." The chyron screamed, "Crockett's race obsession." Conservative influencers ran with it. Threads, reels, memes, they cut out the context, cut out the issue being debated, kept only the part where Crockett, black, bold, unapologetic, called out racism. And that's all Leavitt's audience needed to hear. It was never about truth. It was about traction. Leavitt had studied the game. In a party hungry for viral moments, she played the role of disruptor. Youthful, blonde, eager to outflank her elders in outrage. She knew her lane, and she sprinted in it, manufacturing scandal not to expose injustice, but to provoke identity. And, in Jasmine Crockett, she found a challenge she thought she could break. But what Leavitt didn't count on was Crockett's digital precision. Because Crockett doesn't just argue. She architects moments. She reads the room and the algorithm. She knows when to speak and when to strike. And this time, she didn't interrupt. She didn't argue. She let Leavitt talk herself into the trap. Because when the attack is rooted in bad faith, silence isn't weakness. It's strategy. The tension online grew. People began digging. What exactly was Leavitt attacking? What had Crockett really said? Why did it feel so familiar? Because it was. It was the same old playbook packaged in Gen Z aesthetics, but with 1950s energy, and that's what made it dangerous. This wasn't just one woman versus another. It was a proxy war between truth and spin, experience and entitlement, service and spectacle. What was at stake wasn't just a political soundbite. It was the right to speak truth about race without being vilified, the right to name injustice without being labeled divisive, the right to exist in power as a woman of color without being expected to apologize for it. And Jasmine Crockett knew exactly what was happening. So she waited, let the headlines swirl, let the think pieces clash, let the conservatives crow. And then, she tweeted. But to understand why that moment landed like a thunderclap, to grasp the full weight of the silence that came before the storm, we need to look deeper. Not at Jasmine, but at the one who lit the match and thought she could walk away. Because Karoline Leavitt didn't just miscalculate her target. She miscalculated the moment. And the truth about who she is? It says everything, Karoline. Leavitt's story reads like a political product launch. Raised in New Hampshire, she wasn't born into the halls of power, but she learned quickly how to mimic those who were. At just 23, she landed a coveted role as assistant press secretary. In Donald Trump's White House, a job less about crafting truth and more about curating chaos. It wasn't about experience, it was about performance. From there, the playbook sharpened. She pivoted to Newsmax, where her commentary became a training ground in provocation. Leavitt didn't just report the culture war, she monetized it. On screen, she railed against leftist indoctrination, open borders, and what she called the weaponization of identity politics. The terms were loaded, designed for clips, engineered to trigger. But behind the buzzwords was a carefully calculated persona. Every segment followed a formula. Weaponize patriotism, dismiss systemic racism, frame accountability as censorship. She spoke in absolutes, knowing nuance doesn't trend. She leaned into controversy because she knew the algorithm rewards outrage. And when she launched her congressional run at just 24, she didn't promise policy. She promised pushback. Her stump speeches weren't about roads, schools, or jobs. They were about stopping the radical left, canceling the cancel culture, and restoring traditional American values, though what those values were remained vague. Clips from her campaign lit up right-wing Twitter. In one, she barked, "If the squad can shout, I can shout louder." In another, "I will never apologize for being white, straight, or conservative." Thunderous applause, retweets, donations, but dig deeper, and the contradictions emerge. For someone so loudly anti-woke, Leavitt's own rise depended on the very tools she mocks. Social media virality, identity branding, and curated victimhood. For someone who decries entitlement culture, she's spent her career skipping lines fast-tracked, not through service, but sensationalism. For someone who claims to fight for working Americans, her legislative proposals are thin. Her interviews are thick with buzzwords but light on substance. Her brand isn't built on solutions. It's built on spectacle. And spectacle needs an enemy. Enter Jasmine Crockett, a woman of color, a civil rights attorney, an unapologetic Democrat with a sharp tongue and sharper intellect. In Leavitt's world, Crockett wasn't just a political opponent. She was a caricature waiting to be flattened. Leavitt knew exactly how to frame it. She didn't have to say the quiet part out loud. Just nudge it, hint at it, and let the outrage ecosystem do the rest. Accuse Crockett of race baiting, and the implication lands with weight. Paint her passion as aggression, her clarity as chaos. reduce her identity to a threat. It's a tactic as old as American politics. But Leavitt did it with a fresh coat of influencer gloss. She smiled while doing it. She called it real talk. She branded it as bravery. And for a moment, it worked. Right-wing media crowned her the new anti-AOC. The Federalist praised her as fearless. CPAC offered her a keynote. Her donor base grew. She was ascending, fueled by grievance, turbocharged by sound bites. But arrogance has a way of mistaking noise for strength. And in Jasmine Crockett, Leavitt didn't just find a rhetorical opponent, she found someone who didn't play by the script because, while Leavitt rehearsed one-liners, Crockett built her career in courtrooms. While Leavitt sought airtime, Crockett fought for actual people. While Leavitt posted, Crockett listened. And when the cameras rolled in that committee room, Leavitt didn't come armed with facts. She came with attitude. She thought she could provoke a headline. But instead she exposed herself, not as a warrior, but as a vessel echoing the same tropes, the same tactics, with none of the depth. Her conviction? Manufactured. Her courage? Scripted. Her vision? Empty. She's not an anomaly. She's a product, built for outrage, polished for conflict, empty beneath the gloss. And what she tried to do to Jasmine Crockett wasn't new, it was just loud. But across the aisle stood someone who couldn't be more different. Before she ever stepped onto the House floor, Jasmine Crockett was already fighting battles that cameras never caught. Long before the headlines, the hashtags, or the viral tweets, she was standing in Dallas courtrooms, defending those the system had written off, people who couldn't afford a decent attorney, who never had a shot to begin with. Jasmine didn't come from dynastic power or curated privilege. She came from grit, from truth-telling, from the reality that justice doesn't just fall from the sky, it's fought for, day by day, case by case. She started as a public defender, and in those fluorescent-lit courtrooms, she learned how power works. She learned that being right isn't always enough, that sometimes being loud is survival, that sometimes being black, female, and fearless made you a target before you ever opened your mouth. But Jasmine opened her mouth anyway. She became a civil rights attorney, took on cases no one else would touch: police misconduct, voter suppression, housing discrimination. Not because it was trendy, but because it was necessary. She built her name not on platforms but on principle. And when the 2020 racial justice reckoning swept the country, Jasmine wasn't just tweeting from the sidelines. She was organizing, showing up, getting arrested for the people she served, making good trouble. The people noticed, her district noticed. And when a seat opened in the Texas House, they asked her to run. She didn't have corporate PAC money. She didn't have national endorsements. She had people. She had a cause. And she had receipts. She won. And then 2 years later, when the seat in Congress opened up, she ran again. This time, they underestimated her. They said she was too radical, too loud, too black, too inexperienced. They said she'd never win in a crowded primary, that the establishment would crush her. She didn't just win. She dominated. And when she arrived in Washington, she didn't shrink. She stepped into the chamber with fire in her voice and her district in her heart. She wasn't there to play nice. She was there to represent. Fully, fiercely, unapologetically. Her speeches weren't sanitized for mainstream media. They were real, raw, rooted in lived experience, and the people felt it. TikTok picked her up immediately. Clips of her dismantling GOP talking points spread like wildfire. Her takedown of Marjorie Taylor Greene, 500,000 stitches in 24 hours. Her defense of black hair and identity during a dress code debate, a cultural moment. Her calm fury during the George Floyd protest hearings, instant legend. Gen Z crowned her auntie with a law degree. The squad clapped when she rose to speak, not because it was performative but because she was real. They saw her as one of their own truth-tellers in a room built for fiction. And her district? They showed up with signs, shirts, and chants. Crockett don't miss. Straight out of Dallas, straight into Congress. She wasn't trying to go viral. She was trying to be heard. The virality just proved people were listening. But for all the fire she brings, there's elegance too. Jasmine knows when to pause, when to breathe, when to let the silence make the room uncomfortable. Because she's lived in rooms that tried to erase her. She doesn't flinch under pressure. She's made of it. She's not here to entertain. She's here to serve, and that's what separates her from people like Karoline Leavitt. Jasmine's not chasing clout. She's chasing change. She doesn't need to manufacture outrage. She's lived the consequences of it. She doesn't need to cosplay patriotism. She practices it by holding power accountable, not just holding microphones. She is, in every sense, the opposite of what Leavitt pretends to be, because Jasmine Crockett didn't rise through spin. She rose through service. And yet, every step of the way, she's been underestimated. They think her curls make her less serious. They think her tone makes her less credible. They think her race, her voice, her gender, her grit make her less deserving of space. But Jasmine's presence is the disruption. She walks in with all the things they tried to suppress, and she weaponizes them into truth. And so when Karoline Leavitt pointed her finger, twisted her words, and tried to stage a public takedown, when the headlines started to churn and the tweets started to fly, when conservative media tried to flatten her into a trope, Jasmine didn't panic. She didn't plead. She didn't even raise her voice. Because she knew something Karoline didn't. You don't need to shout to strike back. Sometimes you just tweet. So when Karoline came for her, Crockett didn't flinch. She tweeted. The hearing room hummed with low chatter, pens clicking, papers rustling until Karoline Leavitt leaned into the mic. Madam Chair, I just want to raise a concern about the recent comments made by Congresswoman Crockett, who, once again, seems intent on reducing every issue regardless of merit to race. Silence. A few heads turned. Crockett didn't. Leavitt continued, voice sweetened with condescension. It's disappointing that in a chamber meant for solutions, some choose to divide us along lines of identity instead of focusing on policy. I'm not sure how the color of someone's skin affects border security or inflation. There, it was the dog whistle. Pitch perfect for cable news. A conservative staffer's phone lit up with a notification. Karoline confronts race rhetoric. In real-time, tweets began to fly. Crockett playing the race card again. When will the left stop with the victimhood? Jasmine sat motionless. Not because she was shocked, because she wasn't. This was the game. A pre-written narrative, deployed like a trap. Paint her as the aggressor, then frame any response as proof. Behind Leavitt's words was strategy not to debate, but to bait. And Jasmine knew it. She blinked. One long breath. Her fingers remained interlocked on the table, her eyes steady. Inside, her thoughts moved faster. They think I'll fold. They don't know I came up swinging in court. Crockett had faced tougher opponents with fewer cameras, prosecutors who sneered, judges who interrupted, clients who cried silently, knowing the odds were never in their favor. She knew injustice in its rawest form. So this was just theater. But outside that chamber, the real storm brewed, right wing. Blogs published articles within the hour. Crockett slammed for race baiting during hearing. Headlines didn't quote her words. They quoted Leavitt's version. And that was enough. Fox Primetime aired the clip on loop. Pundits nodded gravely. She's clearly unhinged. One anchor added, if this is the future of the Democratic Party, we're in trouble. GOP colleagues on the committee added fuel. She's always making it about her identity, one said, barely whispering. Another scoffed, "Why does she even need to bring race into this? No one else did. No one else had to. Because Jasmine's very presence, her voice, her name, her skin was always marked other. She was never allowed to just be a congresswoman. She was always the black congresswoman. Loud, radical, angry. It didn't matter what she'd said. It mattered what they wanted people to believe she said, and that belief was already spreading like wildfire." Still, Jasmine didn't interrupt, didn't take the bait, just sat there. And across social media, her base noticed, "She's really gonna let this ride? She's too quiet. Something's coming. She's watching, calculating. Wait for it." Because those who knew her knew, Crockett never swings first. She studies, she times it, and then she lands a strike that echoes. The hearing continued. Leavitt, satisfied, leaned back in her chair. The narrative was in motion. Her followers were already sharing the clip. The moment was hers for now. But Jasmine Crockett had always understood something Leavitt didn't. A live mic isn't always the loudest weapon. Sometimes, the real battle is fought after the hearing, in public, in pixels, and in words measured not for sound bites, but for impact. So as the final gavel hit wood and the committee adjourned, Jasmine gathered her notes. No expression, no rush. She stepped into the hallway, phone in hand, press nearby. But she didn't give a statement. She didn't pose. She didn't perform. She simply looked down at her screen, scrolled once, paused, and then Jasmine Crockett opened the app. Jasmine Crockett had options. She could have gone live, unloaded a thread, dropped receipts, tagged names. Her mentions were on fire, her supporters itching for a clapback. But that's not how Jasmine played. She knew what the moment demanded. Not volume, not vengeance. Precision. So she sat alone in her office, scrolling through her drafts. One tweet read, "When you don't have policy, you attack identity. Too predictable." Delete. Another, "My record speaks. Leavitt's followers just don't want to listen. Too long." Delete. She took a breath, and then 10 words, not a paragraph, not a thread, just one perfect measured sentence. She can't cancel what she can't comprehend. She stared at it. No hashtags, no emojis, no call-outs, just truth. And then send. Within 60 seconds, the ripple began. 20 retweets, then 200, then 2,000. Her name trending in every major city. In 10 minutes, screenshots of the tweet replaced profile pictures. TikTok edits dropped. One showed Leavitt blinking awkwardly during the hearing, followed by Jasmine's tweet sliding across the screen like a cinematic subtitle. The sound? Kendrick Lamar's "Be Humble." Twitter exploded. She didn't even tag her queen. Behavior. She said more in 10 words than Karoline has in her whole career. The art of a black woman reading you without raising her voice. And it wasn't just fans. AOC reposted it with a smirking emoji. Ayanna Pressley added, "Elegance, intelligence, power." Joy Reid broke it down on MSNBC that night like a thesis. "It wasn't just shade," she said. "It was strategic." Crockett gave Leavitt exactly what she earned, nothing more, nothing less. By midnight, major media outlets had picked it up. Jasmine Crockett delivers viral takedown after race-baiting accusations. Freshman Republican silenced by tweet. Heard round the hill. Crockett doesn't clap back, she commands. Even conservative networks had to acknowledge it, though they tried to spin it. One Fox anchor said, "It's alarming to see such casual disrespect from a sitting member of Congress." But the desperation showed, because Leavitt? Silent, no press release, no appearance, no clever rebuttal. Just silence. She'd gone from calculated attack to a trending punchline in under 2 hours. The tweet was everywhere, projected onto buildings in Atlanta, plastered onto protest signs in Philly, printed onto T-shirts sold on Etsy before dawn. But Crockett? She didn't retweet herself. She didn't pin it. She didn't bask. She logged off. She showed up to her next committee hearing in a deep red, power suit, hair laid, posture straight. She took notes, asked questions, voted, left, and said nothing. That silence hit harder than any monologue could have, because Jasmine Crockett wasn't trying to win a moment. She was modeling a movement. She reminded people, especially black women, immigrants, LGBTQ folks, anyone ever told to sit down or shut up, that dignity doesn't mean silence, and grace doesn't mean weakness. She flipped the script. She made the attack look tired. She made the aggressor look small, and she made resistance look regal. By the weekend, cultural critics were writing essays about the tweet. An entire generation raised on respectability politics just witnessed the rise of strategic defiance. The Crockett Doctrine. Speak once. Let the world echo. 1. Viral comment summed it up best. She didn't throw shade. She built a solar eclipse. For Karoline Leavitt, the consequences lingered. Donors still showed up, but quieter now. Conservative surrogates stopped mentioning the hearing altogether. When asked about Crockett's tweet, Leavitt pivoted to gas prices because she knew. This wasn't just a loss, it was exposure. The manufactured outrage, the pre-planned clip, the attempt to turn a black congresswoman into a soundbite obliterated by a single sentence that felt like a verdict. And while Leavitt faded into the next media cycle, Crockett's moment morphed into something bigger. More than a tweet, more than a clapback. It was a shift in how power responds to provocation, a shift in who gets to be calm, composed, and correct in the face of chaos, a shift in what it looks like to stand up without screaming. Because Crockett didn't just win an argument, she redefined the battlefield. And as the days passed, the tweet kept climbing, quoted in commencement speeches, used in protest chants, etched into murals. In every corner of the internet, people posted their own variations. You can't cancel what you refuse to shrink for. They can't erase what they never understood. Be like Jasmine. Choose precision over panic. And Crockett, she just kept working, kept legislating, kept showing up, kept being, because for her, this wasn't new. It was Tuesday. But for those watching, for the millions who saw themselves in her poise, her patience, her power, this was a revelation. This was proof that you don't have to shout to be heard. That you don't have to fight dirty to win clean. That dignity, wielded with discipline, is disruptive. And that one woman, with one tweet, can halt a machine built to silence her. But this wasn't just a win for Crockett. It became a cultural moment. The tweet didn't just trend, it detonated. Crockett claps back soared to #1 on Twitter by noon, with the Karoline who not far behind. In less than 24 hours, the tweet had racked up over 2 million impressions. Politico called it the most effective one-line rebuttal in recent congressional history. Rolling Stone just called it art. On MSNBC, the praise came in waves. Jasmine Crockett didn't just respond, said Joy Reid. She elevated the conversation. She did what every black woman in a hostile room has dreamed of doing, correcting disrespect without stooping to disrespect. Over at Fox News, the tone was different, louder, shakier. Disgraceful, barked one host. Another example of woke. Democrats making everything about race, another guest muttered. These women don't know their place anymore. But that sentence, those last 5 words, only proved Jasmine's point. TikTok had already turned the tweet into a dozen remix trends. One user lip-synced the line in a courtroom wig. Another choreographed a dance that ended with a finger wag and the words floating above her. She can't cancel what she can't comprehend. Gen Z ran wild. She's one of us. read the caption on a viral post that paired the tweet with scenes from Scandal and The West Wing. This is what happens when you try to play chess against someone who is the board. Someone else posted, Jasmine Crockett, lawyer, congresswoman, icon, destroyer of fragile egos. Comedians couldn't resist either. One stand-up joked, Karoline brought Fox News energy to a courtroom queen girl. What did you think was gonna happen? Influencers began stitching the moment into broader commentary. About black women at work, about weaponized civility, about performative whiteness masquerading as political debate. Even professors weighed in. A linguist at Howard University broke the sentence down like literature. It's not just what she said, it's how she said it. Ambiguous enough to evade censorship, sharp enough to slice through spin. Meanwhile, conservative influencers scrambled. Some insisted Crockett was bullying. Others tried to twist the tweet as coded racism, a desperate reach that even their own base couldn't rally around. But the panic was real. One GOP strategist leaked a memo warning Republican candidates to avoid clapback culture, citing Crockett's tweet as a prime example of how the left wins the meme war. Too late. The meme war had already been lost, because what Jasmine delivered wasn't just a one-liner. It was a cultural torch passing. This wasn't AOC reading someone on the floor. This wasn't Maxine Waters reclaiming her time. This was a new frequency, a new fluency. Crockett wasn't just fluent in policy. She was fluent in platform. She spoke Congress and culture in the same breath. She could navigate hearings and hashtags with equal ease. For Gen Z, that mattered. To young black girls in high school civics classes, to first-gen college students with activist hearts, to everyday people tired of watching politicians dodge truth. For optics, Jasmine Crockett became a symbol, not of rage, of restraint, not of chaos, of command. And if history had a notepad, it was writing in bold, because this moment joined a lineage: Shirley Chisholm's chair at the table, Barbara Jordan's Watergate speech, Maxine Waters holding the line. Crockett wasn't trying to be them. She was them, reimagined for now, an inheritor of civil rights fire. With Wi-Fi and wit. One TikTok stitched her tweet over a beat and titled it, Digital Resistance. Another said, she did in one sentence what most campaigns can't do in 6 months, shift power without permission. Even corporate America noticed. A coffee brand tweeted the quote alongside their morning blend. A t-shirt company sold out of can't cancel what you can't comprehend hoodies by the weekend. But through it all, Crockett remained the same. No tour, no podcast, no monetization. She kept showing up to vote, kept drafting bills, kept mentoring interns, because for Jasmine, the tweet wasn't the story. The people were. The ones who'd been silenced, underestimated, mislabeled, misquoted. This moment was theirs too. A victory for clarity in an age of distortion. A reminder that integrity doesn't need amplification. It creates its own, and so as the internet erupted, and the headlines swirled, and the memes raged on, Jasmine Crockett did what only real power can do. She moved on, because for Crockett, it was never just about the clapback. In the end, it wasn't the tweet that changed everything. It was what the tweet revealed. It exposed how power responds to composure, how truth, spoken plainly, can eclipse the loudest lies, how dignity, held tightly in the heat of confrontation, can be more disruptive than outrage. Jasmine Crockett didn't win because she was louder. She won because she stood taller. She didn't clap back to prove she was right. She clapped back to remind the country that being right isn't a strategy, it's a responsibility. And in doing so, she proved something far deeper. That grace under fire isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It's strength. It's leadership. Because Crockett's story isn't about a perfect soundbite. It's about how you carry yourself when you're being caricatured. It's about how you hold your head high when others want you to. Lower your voice. It's about knowing that representation doesn't just mean being in the room. It means reshaping the room by your presence. She showed us what that looks like. In a Congress often consumed by shouting, spectacle, and viral self-interest, Crockett showed what quiet confidence can do. She didn't need to humiliate Karoline Leavitt. She simply needed to tell the truth and trust the people to feel its weight. And they did, because people are tired. Tired of trolling passed off as policy. Tired of empty gestures dressed up as conviction. Tired of watching service replaced with stunts. Crockett offered something different. She offered clarity. Her leadership style isn't based on scoring points, it's based on protecting people. She doesn't weaponize identity. She dignifies it. She doesn't perform toughness, she embodies it. And when she speaks, it's not to dominate, it's to defend. I fight smart. I fight fair. I fight for those who can't. That's how she put it in a town hall weeks later. Not a slogan. A creed. That's why she didn't spiral into rage when attacked. That's why she didn't feed the spin machine. Because she wasn't there for Karoline Leavitt. She was there for the little black girl who'd one day watch that clip and understand. That power doesn't mean pretending. It means owning who you are fully. Crockett's moment mattered not because it went viral. It mattered because it validated a generation. A generation of young people who are told they're too much, too loud, too opinionated. A generation told to tone it down, smooth it out, make it palatable. She showed them the opposite: be sharp, be whole, be unshakable. You don't need to scream to win. You need to stand. You need to stand in your truth, your values, your worth, and let that speak louder than any insult ever could. This was never about a tweet. It was about what the tweet represented: a shift. Shift toward politics that doesn't apologize for authenticity. A shift toward leadership that listens more than it lectures. A shift toward a future where courage doesn't come with a costume, but comes wrapped in lived experience. Jasmine Crockett didn't just represent her district that day. She represented an idea. That truth is louder than trolling. That service outlasts spin. That courage doesn't always roar, but it always rises, and as the noise faded and the timelines moved on, that idea remained, etched into the feed, etched into the culture, etched into the memory of everyone who saw her take the hit and answer it with elegance. One tweet, one voice, a storm of change. Jasmine Crockett didn't need a podium, a press conference, or a viral campaign team. She needed a moment and the clarity to claim it. 10 words. No hashtags, no yelling, just truth. And that truth echoed through Congress, through timelines, through communities that have long waited to see someone stand tall without shrinking for anyone, because, in the end, this wasn't just about politics, it was about possibility. The possibility that one voice, when it speaks with purpose, can cut through noise. That a single sentence, grounded in dignity, can silence spin. That grace is not weakness, and that restraint is not surrender. And if Jasmine Crockett proved anything, it's this: your voice matters too. Whether you're sitting in a classroom or a courtroom, whether you've been talked over or underestimated, whether you've been told you're too bold, too proud, too much, you belong in the room, just as you are. So if this story moved you, share it. If you've ever been underestimated, comment. Your moment. And if you believe in truth over theatrics, subscribe. This is just one chapter. The next ones are still being written. Because somewhere out there is another Jasmine Crockett. Another voice waiting for its moment. And in a world of noise, be the truth that echoes.